You know that quiet Sunday afternoon when everyone else is texting their siblings about family drama, and you're sitting alone with a book and a cup of tea, and someone asks if you're lonely, but the truth is, you forgot anyone was supposed to be there? That half second before you answer, when you wonder if something's wrong with you, for being so fine with your own company. You've heard it 100 times. Only child, so you must be lonely, spoiled, socially stunted. Like being comfortable in your own head is some kind of developmental failure. Like the fact that you don't need constant company means you're missing something everyone else has. And maybe you've started to believe it, that quiet equals broken, that solitude equals sad, that if you were normal, you'd feel the absence more. But what if the thing everyone thought you were missing was actually the thing you were building all along? Let's start here. You've been told your whole life that being comfortable alone is a warning sign, that needing fewer people means you're missing something. But here's what actually happened. While other kids were learning to manage sibling rivalry and share space by necessity, you were learning something else entirely: how to be deeply, genuinely okay with yourself. Think of it like this. Most people learn to swim by being thrown in the pool with other kids, splashing, clinging, learning to stay afloat in the chaos. You learned to swim in still water. You learned to read the temperature, the currents, your own body, without the distraction of other people's panic. It's not a deficit. It's a different skill set entirely. Psychologist Stephen Ishans studied only child personality patterns for years and found something the stereotypes miss completely. Only children don't have lower social skills. They have what he calls solitude tolerance, the ability to be alone without distress. Most people treat alone time like holding their breath underwater. You treat it like breathing. That's not loneliness. That's emotional self-sufficiency. And it didn't happen by accident. While other kids were learning to get their needs met through sibling negotiation, borrowing toys, sharing attention, fighting for space, you were learning to meet your own needs, to entertain yourself, to self-soothe without an audience. You weren't lonely. You were learning to be whole without needing someone else to complete you. Now here's where it gets even better, because here's what the research actually shows. Toni Falbo ran longitudinal studies on only children for decades, and she found something incredible. Only children consistently score higher on divergent thinking tasks. That's the brain's ability to generate multiple solutions, to think laterally, to build entire worlds inside your head. Why? Because when you spent hours alone as a kid, your brain didn't shut off, it built. You weren't passively lonely. You were actively constructing narratives, imagining conversations, problem-solving in silence. Your brain was doing in solitude what other kids' brains did in play with siblings, except you had to be every character. Hero, villain, sidekick, audience. That's not deprivation. That's cognitive training. And there's more. Because you spent more one-on-one time with adults than most kids do, you developed what developmental psychologists call deep parental attunement. You learned to read emotional subtext before you had the words for it. You learned to sit through adult conversations without fidgeting. You learned to exist comfortably in spaces that felt too serious, too quiet, too mature for your age. While other kids were speaking sibling, you were learning to speak adult. You picked up tone, implication, the weight of what wasn't being said. That's why you've always felt more comfortable in deep one-on-one conversations than surface-level group banter. It's not that you can't do the group thing. It's that your brain was trained for depth, not breadth. And that training shaped the way you build relationships now. Researchers call it the small social radius, deep relationships pattern. You don't need a dozen friends. You need 2 or 3 people you can talk to for hours without performance. And that's not a limitation. That's a design. Let me tell you about David. He's a 28-year-old software engineer, only child, and he spent most of college thinking he was socially broken. Everyone else wanted to hit every party, every group hangout, every loud bar on Friday night. David wanted one-on-one coffee dates, long walks, late-night conversations about things that actually mattered. People told him he was too serious, not fun enough. So he tried to force himself into the shape everyone expected. Showed up to parties he hated, laughed at jokes that didn't land, pretended he needed what everyone else seemed to need, and it felt like drowning. So he stopped. He built a small circle of friends who wanted the same kind of depth he did. He spent Friday nights coding passion projects or reading instead of performing extroversion he didn't feel. He gave up the approval of people who needed him to be different, and what he built in return was a life where solitude feels like home, not exile. A career where deep focus is his greatest asset. Friendships where silence isn't awkward, it's comfortable. David didn't fix himself. He stopped apologizing for the self he'd already built. And that's the point. You're not missing siblings. You built a self that doesn't outsource its happiness. So the next time someone asks if you were lonely growing up, you'll know the truth. You weren't waiting for someone to arrive. You were building a world that didn't need rescuing. Every hour you spent alone wasn't empty, it was construction. Your brain learning to think in layers, your heart learning to be steady without needing constant reassurance. Your sense of self becoming something solid, not something that shifts depending on who's in the room. The research backs you. Cillians, Falbo, decades of developmental science. Only children aren't lonelier. They're not less social. They're architects of unusually rich inner lives. You're not an only child who missed out. You're an architect who built inward. And that world you made, it's not a consolation prize. It's the foundation of everything you are. So stop apologizing for needing less noise. That quiet you've always carried, it's not a deficit, it's a skill.